Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Creative Adventures. I've recently come across several YouTube videos on dot mandala style paintings, and I think they're really beautiful. So I've been wanting to try it myself. So we're just going to jump right in. First, I want to talk about the tools I'm going to be using today. I'm starting off with a 28-piece transfer punch set. Now, I'm not going to be using this as it's intended, obviously, but the base of these punches actually have a nice flat bottom, so they make perfect, consistent dots on your canvas. I saw this tip on a couple of different YouTube channels, which I'll link in my blog, but this set also gives you a really nice variety of sizes. As you can see, there's quite a large difference between the largest punch and the smallest. Now, I will also be using some ball tools. You've probably seen me use these in some of my cake decorating videos because I frequently use them to model gum paste and fondant. They are actually made for sculpture and modeling. They also come in a pretty big variety of sizes. There's a pretty distinct difference between the largest ball tool in the set and the smallest. And then finally, for my dotting tools, I'll also be using these really teeny tiny ball tools. You'll actually often see these sold as manicure ball tools because they're used for nail art pretty frequently. But you can see how teeny tiny that is. Now for my paint today, I'm starting off with a white. This is the Flow Acrylic from Artist Loft. I keep a big jug of this because I've been using it in my pouring videos, but it's actually the perfect consistency for dots. The other paints I will be using today are primarily from Deco Art, and they are the Americana brand. I'll be using Sea Breeze, Teal Mint, Peacock Teal, Coral Blush, and finally I'll be using a metallic from Art Minds. It's a metallic copper. I'm also using some GAC 800. This is from Golden. It's actually a medium for pouring acrylic colors, but it gives me a really nice consistency of these paints for dotting. You don't want your paint to be too thick because then it will stand up on the canvas, but you also don't want it to be runny, so I'm adding just a little bit, probably about 30% of my paint amount to my actual paint, and then I'm just mixing that in really well with the end of my paintbrush. I'm looking for my paint to smooth out on top as I pull the end of my paintbrush out of the puddle. Now, I'm starting with a very small canvas today. This is just a 5x5 canvas board. I've already prepped it by painting it black with a black acrylic paint and letting that dry. To mark some guidelines, I'm going to be using this charcoal white pencil, and I've got a ruler and a compass nearby so I can very easily mark some guides and some circles right onto my canvas. This charcoal pencil will actually erase really easily once my paint has dried. I'll just use a damp Q-tip to erase those lines. So because this is a square canvas, I'm starting on each corner and drawing a line diagonally across to find my center point. And then I will measure all of the sides and find my center point, and then connect those lines across as well, all converging in the middle of my canvas. Next, I'm going to take my compass and fit it with that same charcoal white pencil, and I'm just going to draw 3 concentric circles on my canvas. I'm just kind of arbitrarily placing these. I'm not measuring the distance between them. I just want to give myself some nice circular guidelines to work around as I go. All right, we're ready to start painting. So I'm starting with the largest punch in that punch transfer set. And I'm going to place my center dot first and then work out from there. So I'm just using my white paint. My white's a little bit thicker than the rest of my paints because I didn't add any medium to it. So you'll see me shake the canvas just a tiny bit to get it to lay down after using the white. Next, I'm moving on to one of my medium-sized ball tools from that smallest set, and I'm adding a light teal dot to the north, east, south, and west points around right up next to my center dot, and then I'm going to go back in with that same size and add 3 dots in between each of those. And I want to point out that I am reloading my paint after every single dot. Next, I've switched over to the larger set of ball tools, but it's still one of the smallest. And I've switched to the next darkest color of teal, and I'm placing a slightly larger dot in between all of my first row. Once again, I have switched to the darkest color teal and another slightly bigger dotting tool, and I'm just placing those dots right in between the dots from the previous row. And as you can see, these are lining up perfectly with that first chalk circle that I drew on my canvas. Now I've switched back to my punch tools, and this is not as large of one as the first dot I laid down. I believe this was size number 12. Not real positive, but it's one of the medium punches in the set. And I've gone back to my white paint, and I'm laying a white dot right in between my white straight guidelines, dead center in between them. Now I'm switching over to a very small ball tool. This is one from the manicure set. And here's where I'm going to do a technique called walking the dots. Now, for my first dot at the tip of that white dot, I will load my paint, and then I will load it one more time and walk dots all the way down to the base. If you don't reload your paint, your dots will get smaller and smaller as you go down. So it gives it a really nice, almost like a gradient effect, but with size rather than color. So I'm just walking my dots all the way around those white dots with my lightest teal color. Next, I'm going to do another row of walking the dots, but with my second lightest shade of teal. I'm also using a slightly larger ball tool to create that center dot. I really love the effect that this technique gives you. It really looks like a petal shape forms. It's really beautiful. Our image is really starting to come together now, so I'm going back to my darkest shade, and I'm adding a center dot at the top of each of those petal shapes. As you can see, I've switched back to the blue handled ones, and I'm going to do the same thing and just make that petal a little bit bigger and walk my dots all the way down. As you can see, I've got that center dot right on my second circular guideline. So those guidelines are really helping to make sure my design stays centered and symmetrical. Now back to my lightest shade of teal. I'm using my punch tools again. This is the same size as that last row of white that I did. And I'm putting those right on my straight guidelines in between my petals and on that second circular guideline. And now I have switched to my ball tool sets again. This is another very small one with my medium shade of teal, and I'm walking the dots all the way around that light teal dot. Now back to my darkest shade of teal, and I'm going to do the same with a slightly larger ball tool, walking those dots all the way down to the first row of petals. Now let's add in a nice new bright color. We're going to switch to that coral blush, and I've got a larger ball tool, and I'm going to do another row of walking the dots around that last row of dark teal, and we'll walk those down all the way to the first row of petals. Switching back to my punch tool, I've got my darkest shade of teal, and I'm going right in between that last row of petals I just made and adding a larger dot. I decided I wanted to add a second shade of the coral blush. I wanted to add a lighter value, so I'm mixing up some more paint. I'm adding a little white to it, and then I'll add a little bit of my GAC 800 as well to thin it out some, and then I'll have a lighter value of that coral color. Back to my small set of ball tools, I'm going to add light teal around that last dark teal dot I created and walk my dots all the way down. These will connect with that first row of petals that I made. And now I'm switching to that lighter shade of coral that I made, and I'm going to walk the dots around that last row of light teal. And I'm trying to squeeze these in as best as I can all the way down to that first row of petals. As you can see, I'm kind of going for an ombre effect here. And now back to a slightly larger dotting tool, and back to my darkest shade of coral, and I will walk the dots one more time. This time, this row will connect to the second row of petals that I made. Now I'm ready to incorporate some of that copper color. So I'm using a medium-sized ball tool, and I'm adding a dot right on my diagonal and cross lines, on all of my straight lines. And then I'm going back to my darkest shade of teal, using a small ball tool and walking my dots down. This will add just a really nice embellishment to my corners. Now, using one of my medium ball tools, I'll add another metallic dot on just my diagonal lines, and then I'm going to walk those dots all the way around that dark teal. So here's what we've got so far. I went into this not really with a plan. I was just kind of winging this pattern, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. But I do want to add just a little bit more embellishment to it. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit so I can add some top dots. Once my painting has dried, I am going to go ahead and clean those guidelines off. So I've just got a damp Q-tip, and I'm just using that to wipe away that chalk. And now we're ready to add some top dots. I'm going in with my lightest coral shade and a size smaller than my middle dot. It's about half the size of it. And I added that right to the center. And then I took an even smaller punch with my darker coral, and I'm adding it to that first row of white dots. And I'm intentionally kind of adding these towards the inside of the dot so that it looks like it's kind of pointing at the center. Next, I'm going to take my metallic and add it to my teal dots, my light teal dots, and then I'm going to take some white and add it to my dark teal dots. And here's what my finished painting looks like. Now I just need to touch up some of my black where I rubbed it away on the corners and give it a coat of varnish, and it's ready to frame.